Shaun Burnie, an independent nuclear energy consultant from Scotland. Mr. Burnie, many thanks for being with us here on the channel. Now, we now know that uranium robs at reactor number 2 at the Fukushima plant were fully exposed for some period of time. How dangerous is that?
That is one of the nuclear industry's worst nightmares. The consequences are that the fuel is no longer being cooled. So you have very energetic nuclear fuel. Within this core, within the reactor, we estimate maybe 80 to 90 tons of highly radioactive fuel. It will be heating up over a period of time, over hours. It will get to a point during which it will be producing gases. Those gases will be building up pressure inside the pressure vessel in Unit 2. And the question is, at what point will they not be able to retain the pressure, and there will possibly be a third explosion.
And Japan is widely perceived as being one of the most technologically advanced nations, and now we're seeing them really struggling to cool down these reactors for a third day. Why is that?
I don't think any advanced industrialized society could have coped with what we've experienced in the last 4 days. One of the problems in Japanese culture is at a societal and government level is this faith in technology. And the problem is with nuclear power, these are technologies that were developed in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. They were designed, these type of reactors were actually designed for use in nuclear submarines. Admiral Richthofen, who was the creator of the nuclear navy in the United States, he concluded that the design of a reactor to fit into the small confined space of a submarine was not the basis for a nuclear power program. And that's unfortunately where we have around 445 of these reactors around the world. So the technology is decades old. The society, the government, the regulators believe that the technology can be operated safely. And if you visit Fukushima, as I have on a number of occasions, it looks very sophisticated. I'm sure the workers there are absolutely dedicated to their job, but there's a built-in psychological complacency that if you're operating something that's so inherently dangerous, when you go to work every day, do you keep thinking about how dangerous that technology is? That would be, over time, rather damaging psychologically. So in other words, they convince themselves that they've mastered this technology. And unfortunately, with nuclear power, there's no second chance.
Well, you earlier described the situation in Japan as a nightmare. And despite these blasts, the government in Japan is insisting that safety levels are fine and that there's no health risk. It's obvious that they don't want to cause panic. That's understandable. But are they really giving us the whole story here?
No, they're absolutely not giving the whole story. They probably don't know the whole story themselves. Even though it's only in Tokyo, which is relatively close to Fukushima. Over many years, the nuclear industry and the regulators in Japan, but also in every society, every country that operates nuclear power, you find consistently that there's a lack of transparency, a lack of openness. Maybe they just think, I think arrogantly, that's too much information. Why should we provide that information? So I think the situation in Japan is absolutely critical. The state of the fuel at the reactor number 3 that exploded last night, we know that for many hours, half of the core was exposed. So there's a very strong possibility that the fuel that has melted has already moved down the reactor pressure vessel and is now at the base of that reactor vessel. That could cause huge problems and, of course, major radiological releases. But remember, according to international standards, there is no safe threshold for man-made radiation. So any dose, including the dose that hit the sailors on board USS Ronald Reagan, that can have health consequences. Well, they're not going to drop down dead, but on the ship. But the idea that to communicate that there's no risk from any radiation is clearly wrong.
Well, let's just clarify what you're saying there, and let's go back to those two explosions that we've already experienced on the Fukushima plant. Apparently, released radioactive substances, radioactive substances were released into the atmosphere as a result of those blasts. What sort of danger does that pose?
Well, certainly the particulates, these are the larger size of nuclear materials, radionuclides. They will be falling out relatively close to the plant. What you will find further away are the so-called fission gases. These are highly mobile, very, very small. They basically rapidly disperse, and it really depends upon the wind, the weather system. If you have rain, which is predicted in the next 12 hours, any radionuclides that are coming out, there'll be a local concentration. When it's dry, and over the coming days, it's dry weather is predicted, then you can have more rapid dispersal over a longer distance. And the latest I've heard is, of course, that the wind direction is switching from the north to the south, which is bad news for Tokyo, because Tokyo is only an hour away. And what's fascinating and terrifying of this situation is the French government, through their embassy in Tokyo, advised French citizens, because of the seriousness of the situation, which they said cannot be predicted and will not be known for a number of days yet. Okay. They advised French citizens to leave the Kanta region, which is metropolitan Tokyo, Gumi and other areas around Tokyo. That's maybe fine for the French citizens, but there's 42 million people living there.
OK, Mr. Shaun Burnie, an independent nuclear energy consultant from Scotland, many thanks for speaking to us on this topic.